Okay, I think I've got it going here. I think I'm going live into the Zoom and live into the thyroid Facebook group. So fingers crossed, this is all going to work. We'll see what happens. So how do we go gluten-free without the overwhelm? So what I discovered recently, just in exploring this in the thyroid Facebook group, is that quite a lot of people think they maybe should be having a gluten-free diet for their health, but either don't do it 100% or don't do it because it feels overwhelming, it feels too hard, they don't know where to start. And I totally get that because I have been there before. And so I just thought I'd share a few tips, a few things that I've found helpful anyway about making that transition to a gluten-free diet without it being overwhelming. So here goes. I put together little slides. Some are prettier than others. We'll see how we go. Okay, now let's see how. Okay, so the plan for today is we're going to look at these 5 different topics. So one is know why you might want to follow a gluten-free diet. So, you know, the knowing why helps. We're going to look at how to tackle it meal by meal. We're going to look at where to find good, easy gluten-free recipes. We're going to talk about the best way to transition according to your personality and maybe your health too, as to how to transition into a gluten-free diet. And I'm going to share with you my biggest tip to reduce the overwhelm, what I think is the most helpful. Might not be for you, but we'll see. That's my tip anyway. So that's the plan. I will have time at the end, if people joining in live throughout this, to answer questions, and we can have some discussion, we can do some troubleshooting. So let's have a go at doing that. So backstory is, for those that don't know, I've got Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. I think I've had it since I was 13. It was picked up when I was 23. And I'm now 45. So I feel like I've lived with it for my whole life, and knowingly for, I guess, at least half of it. So I'm not going to go into all of that story, but as it relates to gluten, I guess I first heard that following a gluten-free diet for Hashimoto as an autoimmune condition probably about quite early on in the piece, actually, from a funny old little naturopath at the local health food shop near where I worked. And then I sort of forgot about it again until about 12 or 13 years ago, when I started seeing the doctor that I still see now for my thyroid. But I didn't really believe her when she said that I should go gluten-free and dairy-free. But I'd flirted with it on and off. But it all just crept in, and it all seemed, as you know, I often have identified, it's too hard, it was too overwhelming, I liked cooking too much, I liked food too much. So it all just seemed too hard, and I didn't really feel that bad when I ate gluten. So I just would do it for a bit and then give it up. Until about 7 or 8 years ago, and what made the shift for me was really understanding more deeply why it was important to follow a gluten-free diet. And I think that's why I'm going to talk about why in a minute, because I think that's really important. If it's just like a fad or something you think everyone's doing, I should do it, it won't work. You won't stick with it. So the shift for me was when I was in a doctor's appointment, and I said to her, tell me why I really have to do this gluten-free thing, because I don't really feel that terrible when I have it. I'm not crippled over in pain. I'm not spending the next, week on the toilet. And the way she described it to me was, when you have an autoimmune condition like I do, then your overall health needs to be, and gut health in particular, needs to be as good as it possibly can be, because your immune system's compromised. And what you want to do is try to prevent against acquiring any other autoimmune conditions. And then she sort of rattled off a whole lot, like, you know, lupus, celiac, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, you know, even things like cancer, all those are the big things. She sort of said, you know, if something big comes along, you want your body to be in as strong a position as possible. And really what that is overall is about reducing inflammation, and a very key part of that is gut health and gut inflammation. So for me, that started the shift towards it being about wellness and not about diet. And I did more digging and research, and I came across the Whole30 program, which I did, or Lee did it with me, and I really followed a pretty strict paleo diet for a full 30 days, and I just felt amazing, actually. And really from then, with all the reading and research I've done then and how I felt, which was amazing, less, you know, bloated, I actually started to lose the addiction I had to food, those real deep sugar cravings and that kind of standing at the pantry and kind of clawing for food, that dissipated over time. Oh, that's my phone. Hold on. I've got Lee calling me in the middle of things. So sorry about that. I might just send him a message. So, oh dear, it always happens when you do something live. Phone rings. So anyway, that was what began the shift for me. I can go through all of that at another time because this isn't really about my story. This is about making it simple for you. Hey, Anna. But that's what made the shift. I began the food blog around that time, or a little bit after that, I guess, as a way of recording what I was cooking and eating. I had a lot of support from my friend Sharon Wilford, who's a naturopath and also a very good friend of mine, and she was like, well, come on, Annabelle, you love cooking, you love food. If anyone can do this, you can do it. You can make it, you know, you just got to make it fun and enjoyable. So that's what I've tried to do, and I guess over time it's become a real passion. So that's why I want to follow a gluten-free diet, but that might be entirely different for you. And so I think it's important for you to do your own research into why you might want to follow a gluten-free diet. But you should seriously consider exploring a gluten-free diet if you have any kind of autoimmune condition at all, because on my reading, they have found leaky gut attached to every autoimmune condition. So yeah, if you've got any gut issues, so prone to bloating, cramping, reflux, diarrhea, constipation, any of that, if you've got gut issues, it's worth exploring cutting gluten out of your diet. If you know you've got leaky gut, or you suspect you might, which I guess ties into those gut issues, leaky gut is basically gut permeability, and gluten is a major contributor to that. More and more there's research into the gut-brain connection, and into gut and immunity. And I think it's something like, don't quote me on this, about 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So gut health is critical to our overall health. And that gut-brain connection, there's a lot of research going into now mental health and even things like brain fog, but mental health, mental illness and gut health. Or if you've got significant skin issues, skin is often a reflection of what's going on in the gut. So, and there's probably more, but if you've got any of those things, then you might want to, and I would say it's worth exploring the impact that gluten has on those things and helping you decide whether you want to follow a gluten-free diet or not. I just want to throw in here, be aware that you might need to look at removing grains as well as gluten. So there are glutinous grains and non-glutinous grains. Sometimes the body has trouble distinguishing between the two. So I'm going to make this really simple because this is about reducing the overwhelm, this little webinar. So I want to keep it really simple, but just keep in the back of your mind, you might need to look at some other things as well. I think what you really need to do is read a good book on the science. That certainly has really helped me solidify the health reasons as to, you know, why I need to be gluten-free. And from my point of view, I'm not a scientist. I'm not really very good at explaining these things in scientific terms, but other people are. So these are my favorite easy to read books on the topic. And in fact, there's one more I want to add into that. So there's Grain Brain, which is fabulous. Dr. David Perlmutter, he's a neurologist. I can't remember if he's a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, but and he is very interesting, and it's an easy enough read. Grain Brain really explores that gut-brain connection, but he goes a lot into the science of explaining why gluten isn't great for the body. Wheat Belly is another really good one. The Paleo Approach, which I've actually pulled out. I actually can't find some of my books, my really good ones, like Grain Brain. I can't find it. I think I lend books and then forget them. But The Paleo Approach by Sarah Ballantyne, she's on Facebook as the Paleo Mom, American Mum. She is a research scientist, and I pulled her book out again today, and I mean, it goes beyond. I mean, it's very detailed. So again, if you want that, this is paleo, which is a bit more than just gluten-free, but there's a lot of really good science in here. It Starts with Food was probably the first book that I've read that was really helpful, by Dallas and Melissa Hartwig. They're the ones that started the program called The Whole 30. But that was a really, really, really good read. And for those in here that are specifically here with thyroid issues, then I think Dr. Isabella Wentz, the thyroid pharmacist, she's got some really good books. But the other one I just want to mention is a book called Gut, and the author, her name is Julia, spelled Guilia something. I'll find it, and if you can't find it, let me know. I haven't read all of it yet. Actually got hold of it when I was in America and was reading it out in the car with the kids, all about poo. So we had a lot of interesting discussion in the car. But she is I don't know if she's qualified yet, but she's studying to be a doctor. And very, very readable, really great book about gut in general, not specifically about gluten-free, but about understanding the gut. So do your own reading, do your own research, work out why you might want to follow a gluten-free diet, because ultimately I can't tell you, you can't, you know, you have to take that ownership for yourself or it won't happen. That's what I just said. You need to be convinced as to why. Take responsibility. It really, I think, is a shift in thinking about making it as a wellness decision. So if you've got chronic health issues, then to me it's a wellness decision. It's not a diet. It's not a diet. It's a wellness choice. In that reading about gluten-free, just delve into that whole, if you're either 100% gluten-free or you're not at all, there is that, I guess I do buy into that. I've done enough reading for myself that, you know, gluten exposure can have an impact on your body for up to 6 months, and I'm not prepared to do that anymore. But I guess this is part of the learning and the transitioning into a gluten-free diet if you're struggling with it, just step by step, and we'll get to that. But for me, as I said before, it's about giving my immune system the best support possible. I don't really want to end up with more chronic health things than I've already got. So I'm very clear now on my why. So that is something that we've all got to figure out for ourselves. So practically, how do we actually tackle it meal by meal? Because I think this is where some of the overwhelm comes, is that you just don't know. And if you're used to cooking with a lot of flour and pasta, you know, it is difficult to know how to go about it. So I think the first thing is know where gluten is found, and a very quick Google search will reveal that. It lurks in a lot of things, but the obvious culprits, wheat, barley, rye. Soy can have it, oats can have it, like a lot of those grains can. So, and it can be hidden in thickeners as well. It can just lurk. So go do the research, look it up, have a list, carry it around in your wallet or screenshot it on your phone, so that when you're going around the supermarket, you can look and know where it's found. So that's helpful, just as a general big picture. I think it is helpful to have a plan if you're wanting to start looking at a gluten-free diet. Have a plan, because if you don't have a plan and you're not prepared, then it won't happen. Be inspired, like do some reading, find some amazing gluten-free recipes. We're going to cover that in a minute. Have some fun with it. But you don't have to find the fanciest looking meals that you think you'll never cook, but just find some interesting things. If you've got particular health issues, do some looking up people who have had those similar issues and have tackled it with diet, and see what transitions they've made. Have a bit of fun with it. I think that was really good advice that my friend Sharon gave me many years ago, was to have fun and just explore and focus on what you can have, not what you can't have. I think that's often really good advice too. And get support, because it's really helpful if you've got support from those that you live with in particular. And if you don't, there's plenty of Facebook groups where you can get support. If you need help, let me know. I'm happy to have a chat and see what I can do to help support you. But I guess the other thing in general terms is it is a big deal. It is a big transition. So acknowledging that it's not easy, but it is possible, might help with that mental adjustment, because I do think it is a mental adjustment and it's a grieving process. Knowing that it's not easy, it's not impossible, and it's easier than you probably think, but it's not easy. And so just knowing that often is quite helpful. Okay, so how to tackle it meal by meal. I'm just going to I'm going to cover breakfast, lunch and dinner. This is it's actually from the contents in my cookbook on breakfast. Breakfast possibly is the hardest meal. If you're used to eating cereal and toast for breakfast, then it can be a hard one. And so I think this is where it's helpful to rethink breakfast. I'm going to show you, so this is my cookbook. We've got things in here, you won't be able to see this clearly, but I've got some just general tips about breakfast tips, like eating leftovers, make yourself a quick omelette. Sometimes a smoothie is just a good option. I've got a recipe in here for breakfast soup, which sounds a bit weird, but actually, particularly in winter, is really lovely. There's things like seed and nut muesli. I forgot 4 or 5 different muesli granola type recipes on what Annabelle cooks. So if you're looking for a cereal alternative, that can be really nice. If you're just looking for gluten-free and not grain-free, then there are better gluten-free breads than there used to be. The Helga's ones now are really quite palatable, and actually even as bread, if you get them fresh, it's quite soft. So there are better alternatives, or things that you can replace than there used to be. So that's breakfast. I've got to say, for me, for breakfast, hold on, I don't have to go. I will usually have eggs, an omelette, or a smoothie, or this kind of breakfast that I've got pictured there, that actually is frozen banana blitzed up in the Thermomix with a scoop of protein powder, and then just my grain-free muesli with some berries. So that's pretty easy. You can even make pancakes, even not just gluten-free but grain-free. You just mash a banana and mix it with an egg and fry it in a pan. It's really easy if you're looking for that sort of pancakey, sweeter type of breakfast. So there's lots of options. I'm going to deal with lunch and dinner in one package because I think by and large they're both main meals, and obviously you can have one bigger than the other, but this is how I sort of approach most of my meal. What protein am I going to use? So I do cook a lot of chicken, mince. Increasingly I do cook a fair amount of fish. I'd eat it much more if it wasn't so expensive, but fish. I pretty much eat all different meats. So I think about, like, what meat am I wanting to cook? If you can afford organic meat, then that's the best option, or free range meat. But just do buy the best quality that you can afford, I think, is my overall general approach. So, think about fat. What fat am I going to cook with it or serve with the meal? So, I do cook a lot with coconut oil and macadamia oil. I would never use coconut oil with red meat. I think it just tastes a bit weird, but it's okay. With things like, chicken and fish, depending on how you're cooking it. You can use olive oil, ghee, butter, good healthy fats. Avocado, very lucky to be married into an avocado family. So Lee's parents owned an avocado farm. So we really need good quality fats. And I think when we're nourishing our body with good quality protein, good quality fats, and fruits and vegetables, then we don't tend to crave those simple carbohydrates in the same way. Focus on the vegetables. So, I tend to buy similar vegetables each week. I think we get into a groove of that, but, I do like to buy something new every now and again. If I see something weird, I'll often buy it and try to work out how to cook it. To add variety, but I think the reality is most of us have a similar range of veggies each week. Try to buy organic where you can. Again, like I said before, buy the best quality you can. You can look at that Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 as well. Go to your local farmers markets, buy your beautiful leafy greens. So look at those different vegetables. And I think when you've got nice varieties of, colours and shapes and textures, then that helps, because you're filling up on this nutrient-dense food as opposed to what I call the empty fillers. And glutinous products, I guess, tend to fall into that empty filler category. So here is my salad tips so they don't get boring, and they do get boring, I get it. So use a variety of leafy greens. Finely chop them, chop them in different shapes and sizes. You can cook some up, leave some raw. Often the stems you can use, and that will add some texture and crunch. I like the rainbow chard for that. It adds a bit of colour. Mix it up, so play around with the size and texture of the veggies you use. You could try a spiralizer or a different kind of julienne type peelers. Add in nut seeds, buckwheat, snow peas, play around with those textures, like the smooth and the crunchy. I think that mouthfeel is really important, and if we're cutting out things that might provide some of that crunch, then look for alternatives to that. Snacks, sorry, the snacks slide's a bit boring, but I was running out of time before we started. So some good gluten-free snacks. Just look for rice-based things. If you're not wanting to cut out all grains, look for your rice-based, like rice crackers, rice cakes. They're great with, cheese and crackers. There's lots of now, nice gluten-free crackers. Rice cakes are a popular snack in our household with a bit of, peanut butter or, something like that on there. Bliss balls are a good snack with, nuts, and you can pimp them up with protein powders, that kind of stuff. Fruit. If you're transitioning, into and you're just wanting to replace gluten things with gluten-free alternatives, then looking at your gluten-free cakes and slices, but be mindful that they're often filled with sugar and, you know, sometimes certainly store-bought ones, preservatives and colours, and like they're not great. But if they're a transition, then that could, you know, that might be a good option. Things like smoothies, I like looking at different jerky, like beef jerky, chicken jerky. They're quite good high protein snacks and chewy, and like gives you a good mouth of workout. So I quite like that. Boiled eggs, you know, they can be a good easy snack. So I actually have got a whole paleo snack ebook. So if you're listening to this and you need help with snacks, they are paleo rather than just gluten-free, but happy to send you that. Where to find good gluten-free recipes? So I think it's much easier than it used to be. There are lots of great recipes, blogs, cookbooks, focusing on going gluten-free or being gluten-free. I guess my general advice is to lean more towards the paleo style ones because they're not just full of gluten-free flour switches. But again, depends on where you're at. I've got my 16-year-old going gluten-free. Well, I don't know. I'm hoping he's going to go gluten-free in the longer term, but we're just giving it a trial for a couple of weeks. And I'm being really mindful to give him some of those gluten-free replacements because I think I've got gluten-free Wheat Bix, gluten-free bread. I bought him some gluten-free biscuits, you know, so things that I wouldn't necessarily eat all that much of, I'm making sure he's got so he doesn't feel deprived. But some good recipe sources. I'm going to give my book a plug again because it actually, I think it does have some good basic recipes in there. Other ones I've got here, these are ones that when I was transitioning to gluten-free and really more paleo that I found helpful. So Eat, Drink, Paleo by Irina Macri. She's Australian. She's got another book, I think, what have I got? Happy Go Paleo. So she's got some good recipes, some really nice ones. Pete Evans, I haven't brought them up, but you know, he's got a gazillion cookbooks. Sometimes feedback I have had in the past is that some of his can be a bit complicated, so take that for what you will. I did have someone return a Pete Evans book once and keep mine because they thought that mine was simpler, so that was nice. But Pete Evans, heaps of recipes. Quirky cooking, like Joe Witten. I really like life-changing food. She's got some really nice bread, gluten-free, well, really grain-free bread recipes in here and pastry. So I've read quite a few things out of this book. I really like that one. Diane Sanfilippo, I don't think I brought her book up, but Practical Paleo was a very early on one that I bought and found quite useful. I haven't got this one. But there's also Well Fed by Melissa Juwan, but she's American, so some of the American cookbooks you've got to sort of translate into Australian. But there were some good recipes in there too in some of that. So now there's so many online. Just find some. Even, you know what, the Coles magazine usually has some pretty good gluten-free recipes actually. So it's easy to get lots of free inspiration. Now, what is the best way to transition according to your personality to a gluten-free diet? So I think there's two ways. One is to go cold turkey and just quit. And the other is what I'm going to call the frog in a pot method, which if we know about the frog in the pot is where, you know, you put the frog into cold water in the pot, and as the water warms and boils, you eventually end up cooking the frog in the pot. But if you put him into the hot water first, he'd just jump out. So I think you've got to work out which way you think is best for you. And I'm going to go through both options and I think give you some tips that would apply to both, or apply to each. And and then we'll go from there. So if you are sorry, brain's going. So here are some tips for going cold turkey. And I think that going cold turkey will suit people who have a bit of an all or nothing personality, people who really are up for a challenge and like hard, like to go, go all in. But I also think this is a really good option for people whose gut or overall health is really not very good at the moment. If you know you're struggling, your gut's struggling, your chronic illness is struggling, your autoimmune issues are flared, I do think that this is a really, like, seriously consider the cold turkey, because you're just going to get better results. And just to be out there, like, I'm a cold turkey person. I am definitely an all or nothing. I'm not so great at moderation. I find it easier. But so some of that is my personality. But here are some tips for going cold turkey, whether you think, if you think this is the way you want to go. Make a decision. Just decide. You're going to do it and when you're going to do it. I would consider going grain-free too, particularly if you've got significant health issues. And I guess that goes back to the know why and go do the reading and research around that. Set an initial time frame so that it doesn't feel too overwhelming. I think where the overwhelm comes in is when you're like, right, I'm never going to eat gluten again. And you might get to that point, but if you're struggling with the overwhelm, maybe set yourself some parameters. I think 30 days is a good parameter because it actually gives your body a good time to rest from digesting gluten. But set a time frame so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming, and then reassess it. You do need to be organised. There's no getting around that, particularly if you're not used to eating this way. You do need to be organised. You need to make sure that your pantry is stocked with either alternatives or replacements. I think it's helpful if you tell people if you're going to go cold turkey, like if you've got social events coming up, if you're going out for dinner, tell people that you need a gluten-free diet, or that you're going gluten-free for health reasons, or, don't have to explain yourself, but I think it's helpful if you tell people. If you're going to someone's home, then offer to bring something. So, but it is helpful not just to keep it to yourself, I suppose. I think if you're going cold turkey, it is more helpful to look at alternatives, not replacements. So, for example, zucchini noodles instead of gluten-free pasta. But again, that's up to you. And if that feels too hard, too fast, then look at some of those replacements. And I guess you could be somewhere between a turkey and a frog. Just decide what you're going to do and do that thing. At the end of that, if you've set it for 30 days, reintroduce after 30 days and see how you feel. If you want to do that, or if you're feeling good, just keep going or set yourself another time frame. Really, I think when you're going cold turkey, you need to invest in your knowledge as to why, because it will get hard, particularly the first, probably few weeks. And if you're not clear as to why you're doing it, you'll give up or you'll sneak things in, and it'll just be more helpful if you're clear. Decide on a treat. Like, have something that you can look forward to. And if what you're doing is giving up gluten, but not looking at some of those other things, decide that you're going to find some delicious gluten-free ice cream to have, or find some chocolate, or, I think you've got to be careful about digging into that too much. But from that mental framework, to have something that you're not feeling deprived. For me, it's my daily coffee, actually. That would be the biggest thing. If I know I can still make myself a coffee, that feels like I'm okay. For me, that's what it is for me. So work out what's something you are going to have if you're getting into that headspace of that I can't have this and I can't have that. Work out, focus on what you can have and make it something you really enjoy. You could look at the 30-day wellness challenge that I offer. It is a bit more than just gluten. It is more of a paleo style, but it is that group environment, so that could be worth exploring. And know that it is a mental game. And I guess that's what I said before, it is hard. It's the mental, it's changing the way you think about it. So that's my tips for going cold turkey. The tips for the slow and steady is, I think, again, make a decision. I still think that's helpful. Decide that you're going to go slow and steady. Decide what approach you are going to take. Are you going to replace glutinous products with non-glutinous versions? Are you going to, or are you going to transition meal by meal? Like, decide what you're going to do and stick with it for a period of time, because that will help reduce the overwhelm, is that you know what to do. Like we said before, learn where gluten lurks, so that you are consciously deciding whether you're eating some gluten or not. So I set the time frame, look for gluten-free replacements. And so I think this is where, if you're going slow and steady, really look for that. If you need that transition, really do that. Like, buy the gluten-free pasta, gluten-free cereals. Often they're pretty gross, but explore that health food aisle, because whilst they're not, some of those alternatives ultimately aren't fabulous, that might be a really good alternative to start with. So, and that might just help without thinking, I'm not going to eat soup for breakfast, I still want to have egg on toast. Fine, have egg on toast, have a gluten-free toast. That kind of replacements. Again, invest in your knowledge as to why, because that might help you make that transition. And invest in that knowledge as to whether or not you can be part-time gluten-free or not. I think that's important. If you're going to take the slow and steady approach, invest in that knowledge and then make those decisions along the way. Again, decide on a treat. A lot of the same things. It's still a mental game. And in some ways, the slow and steady could be harder because you are making more decisions along the way. But if it helps with the deprivation and the too hard, then take the slow and steady route rather than not at all, because it's overwhelming. I do think, be careful here. You might not feel the difference as quickly in your health if you're going slow and steady, but that's okay. If it means that in the long run you can make the transition and you can make it last, then that's okay. You've got to work out what's right for you. One way of doing it could be to transition a meal at a time and say, well, I'm going to have a gluten-free breakfast, or I'm going to make sure my dinners are gluten-free, and just do that for a while. Or you could transition out a product at a time, like, I'm only going to buy gluten-free pasta, or that kind of thing. So you think about what approach is going to work best for you. I think, as I said before, this is not my personality, but I think that the slow and steady personality will suit those without major gut or health issues. If you're just sort of looking at it for overall wellness and you just sort of want to dip your toe in the water, it certainly would help those who need time to wrap their heads around it. And if you feel like, from a mental, I would call it grieving. I feel like it's a grieving process. If you need more time, then this would probably be a perfect way to go about it. And if you're the sort of person that does moderation well, then this could be a good approach as well. So you've got to decide whether you're going to be a turkey or a frog. But okay, here's my biggest tip in the end to reduce the overwhelm. And that is to set some rules. Make a decision, set some rules, because indecision creates anxiety, and the anxiety leads to the overwhelm. So that, I think, for me, really is the biggest. That's my biggest tip, is to just decide. Whatever you decide, make a decision, set some rules and parameters for yourself, whether it's for a day, a week, a month, or lifetime, because then you're not confronted with a decision every time. So when you go to a cafe, if you've decided you don't eat gluten anymore, then the big fluffy cake actually isn't an option anymore. So you don't actually have to make that decision. You don't have to feel that anxiety. You don't have to, you just focus in on what you can have. Yeah, that's my biggest tip is that. Whatever the decision is, make a decision, set yourself some rules, avoid the anxiety of indecision. And I think that will make it much, much easier for you. So they're my tips on how to go gluten-free simply, understanding that it's not actually, I get that it's not a simple process, but it is possible, and hopefully it is something that is really can be enjoyable, not only for the end result of how you feel without it, but the process and the having fun in the kitchen and focusing in on what you can have, and all those things make it an enjoyable process too. So I'm going to wrap up the Zoom. I'm happy to, and I'm going to end the recording, and then I'm happy to have some chats with whoever's online live. So I'm just going to work out, I'm going to stop the live stream on Facebook. I'm going to end the recording.